And so take a minute first with each of you, and let's start with you, Al. Since you're the challenger, I really want to know why you're running. Okay, and what are the core of the differences you see and what difference you'd make?
The reason why I'm running is that I believe that California, which was first in high-paying jobs with high-tech jobs, research and development, agricultural, shipping industries, was the favorite place for businesses to come and do business. We are now rated the least favorite place to do businesses. It has nothing to do with a change in the climate, change in the agriculture, or a change in the desire of the people to work here. It's become a business unfriendly state. The reason why I'm running is because I believe that we could reduce some of the regulations and make it more of a business friendly state.
Can you be specific?
The regulations concerning environmental impact reports, ADA compliance issues, the lawsuits that are generated, the huge permitting fees that and processes that businesses have to go through in order to open up a business.
And so that's your...
That's the reason why I got into the race, because
Okay.
I saw that the state was driving business out instead of encouraging it to come in.
Okay, and so what are the key bills you would see that you would have voted differently on?
The key ones right now that are out there on the table, for one, is the high-speed rail. High-speed rail, I would not have supported. 59% of the population does not support it right now. It's going to be a cost to the taxpayers anywhere from 48 to 200 and some odd $billion. We don't know. We truly don't know. That money could be applied elsewhere. We have cities that are going bankrupt. We have pensions that are unfunded, which you know about. I've read your articles. We just don't need to apply our money right there. So that's one bill. Another huge bill that I would have voted different than Joan Buchanan on was SB 1530. SB 1530.
I'm sorry, I don't remember which one. 1530.
SB 1530 gave school districts flexibility to terminate students, or excuse me, to terminate teachers. Yeah.
I should know. Go ahead.
Yeah. To terminate teachers after there's been a thorough review, peer review, to remove the teachers that have been accused of horrific crimes. This originated out of Miramonte Elementary School, where the teacher blindfolded students, and it's important that people know how horrendous this was. Blindfolded students, took pictures, had them developed at a Walmart or whatever, and the technician called the police, and he was spoon-feeding them semen. He put semen on cookies and spoon-fed it to them. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and that is horrific. And to not be able to empower school boards, the ability to have another tool in their arsenal to get rid of a teacher, that bill was hugely supported. 33 out of the 40 senators voted for it. It came down to the state, the Assembly Education Board. Joan and Tom voted against it. That one was huge.
Okay.
I spoke to the rank and file teachers, and what they tell me, even though that the bill was supported by the Teachers Association, they say they didn't want to share a faculty room with folks that are like this. They don't want to share a restroom with them. They were all for termination. So those are the main differences right off the top.
Okay, so John, well, first of all, why do you want to do this again? And then let's go through some of the specifics, you know.
Well, I mean, I guess I start by saying I think I've been a very effective advocate for the Assembly District, the people in it, whether they're local issues like the Mount Diablo Beacon or getting the paving solved on Mount Diablo Scenic Boulevard going into the park. I mean, I've been there to solve local issues. I think there are some significant areas where, you know, my wealth of knowledge and experience in the public sector has allowed me to make contributions. My 18 years on school board, and I would like to talk a little bit about SB 1530. You know, my knowledge in information technology, I think what we accomplished through the governor's reorganization plan hopefully is going to really streamline the process and allow the state to successfully implement those projects. I've also demonstrated that I can work, I can work across the aisle. I've worked with business. When you talk about streamlining, I was a co-author on AB 900, which streamlined the CEQA process for major projects. Apple down in Santa Clara County is the most recent project to take advantage of that. There's also a major solar farm going in Southern California. And I've spent this last year working with on CEQA issues with Assemblyman Gordon, hoping to continue to streamline it. But I've worked with the education community, with labor, with the chamber, with the communications folks, with people across many industries, and I'm considered a very effective legislator.
I mean, there are a few things along the line.
Well, let's back
Okay,
up.
go ahead, yeah.
You said you wanted to talk about 1530, so let's just go ahead and do that.
Okay, well,
since we opened that door.
Yeah. I would suggest the first thing everyone do on 1530 is read it, including you, Mr. Phillips, because 1530 has nothing to do with removing teachers like the one from Miramonte School in Los Angeles. One is it wouldn't prevent it. Two, the real problems that occur in those sorts of incidents are when they're reported, as they had been years before in Miramonte, and administrators did nothing. They put what had been reported in a file and did nothing to report or investigate. It's no different than what happened in Moraga with the swim coach. It's no different than what's happening down in Santa Clara County right now. The county is actually bringing misdemeanor charges against a principal in San Jose that failed to report. In terms of what it did, when you take a look at it, it allegedly allowed charges to be filed between May and September, but you can already file charges during those periods. It did nothing to reduce the amount of expense it takes to deal with those types of cases, because where it's streamlined, it's a very tail end. And the dismissal process, where it ends up costly for everybody, is the long process you go through when these cases are challenged. It allowed what they call stale evidence more than 4 years to be submitted, although by case law you can already submit or to consider evidence more than 4 years. So if you look at all the key components, it did absolutely nothing that you can't do already. In fact, having been on the school board for 18 years, with these types of cases, the first thing a district does when they're reported is they remove the teachers from the classroom. For our district, we always would bring in an independent attorney because we wanted to be sure the investigation were fair and done by the books. You report it to the proper authorities, and you move forward. And if there's substance to the allegation, you move forward in terms of reporting that teacher to the credentialing commission.
Well, but hold on. But my recollection, and I'm working off a memory of having spent time on this bill, is that the key issue is what happens to the teacher in the interim.
What happens in the teacher in the interim under 1530 is exactly the same that happens to the teacher in the interim right now. There's nothing that changed what happened to the teacher in the interim.
That's not what, when you talk to the author of the bill and their staff and some of your fellow Democrats, that's not what they say.
What did they say?
They say it makes substantial differences in the process.
Oh, I beg to differ with you on that. I mean, I read the bill, I went to the Ed Code, we went past that. I met with the DEACE, the superintendent of LA Unified, and their chief counsel, and they all agreed that nothing would change there. So you're going to have to point out to me where it changes, because Dan, it doesn't.
Because I did spend some time on this when we did the editorial on it.
Right.
So,
I'd be happy to sit down with you and the bill and the Ed Code, because it does not change that. And they sat in my office and admitted to me that nothing would change. Nothing would have changed with the $40,000 buyout that they did.
So we put a challenge out to you.
Right.
What's the solution?
Well, I think there are two solutions. I think one is the evaluation process for teachers and administrators has to change. If you talk to teachers, whether you talk. It is important, and let me try and explain why it's important. Evaluation and discipline and dismissal are two sides of the same coin. And you've got to have a proper evaluation process, and we also then need a bill that deals more effectively with discipline and dismissal. My experience on school board isn't that those teachers who commit the egregious acts, that are accused of sexual misconduct are difficult to get rid of. You take them out of the classroom immediately. The teachers where you have the problem are those who sort of ride that line. And if they appeal, then what you have is a process that can go on for a year and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend. And if we're going to change the system, let's do it in a meaningful way so that we have a system that works, a system that has a meaningful evaluation process, and a system that allows for an effective discipline and dismissal process, and one that gives people, one that includes due process.
So will we see a bill from you in January?
I think you will see a bill from me. You
And
may
what
see
will
two
it
bills.
say?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what the content will be. I have been meeting with people from different groups. I was at a conference last week on Thursday and Friday with Ed Voice. We're actually dealing with principal evaluation, and I have thoughts, but you know, until I have more time to talk, which I hope to do over the next couple months, I can't tell you exactly what the bill's going to say.
May I add one thing to that?
Sure.
The other thing that the bill had in there, it would have made it illegal for teachers to provide peyote, mescaline, or marijuana to students. Right now, those drugs are exempt. Isn't that true?
I'd have to take a look at the bill.
Okay.
I can tell you as a school board member, there would have been.
Well, it had a provision in there that would have removed these from a protected substance.
I believe it was more complicated than that.
It was, but I'm just saying that you know, there was a provision in there for that. So.
There are a couple things that we've been concerned about.
Right.
Let's just quickly hit 3 topics real fast.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask Joan,
Sure.
and then Al, feel free to chime in, okay, on each of the topics. High-speed rail.
High-speed rail was a difficult vote for me because I do believe it should be in California's future. When you get to the point where you have 50 million people in California, your roads and your airports are going to be so congested that, you know, we're going to have parking lots, and so we're going to have to look at alternate forms of transportation, and we need to look at more green forms of transportation. There are definitely flaws in the current high-speed rail plan, but I do think it's important that we move forward. When you take a look at the bookend approach, there will be improvements to transportation in the San Francisco Bay Area and in the Los Angeles basin, helping move people better. When you take a look at the connectivity, there's, you know, I think, you know, in my conversations with Dan Richard, I would have preferred high-speed rail just going parallel down Highway 5 all the way down, because I think you have connectivity and from Sacramento, from the Bay Area, from Los Angeles and other areas. But all of our population growth has been in the Central Valley and is going to continue to be in that area. So
It's still not where the big population centers are.
No, but I think when we get to the point where we've got 50 or 60 million people, you will see major growth in that area. You look at cities like Fresno that have over 1 million people. And so that right now the challenge is, and were certain requirements that were put into the bill that requires, you know, a proper management team to be put in place. It requires reporting. You know, I think that, you know, that we do need to take the next step.
Joan, 3 state senators who were arguably the 3 state senators who studied this the most, Democratic state senators, all voted against this.
Right.
Spent a tremendous amount of time on this bill. Sonia, Lowenthal, Smitty.
Right.
Were they wrong?
I don't know. You know, when you talk to them individually, which I have done, they all believe that high-speed rail should be part of California's future. They wanted to see changes in this plan. So, you know, the question was, is do we move forward? And I think good people can disagree.
If I may.
Mm-hmm.
High-speed rail, the rail system has been around since the early 1800s. To make the railway more efficient is still making something, technology from the 1800s more efficient. It's going to cost anywhere from $400 to $200 billion. We still don't know. It links Madera to Bakersfield on this first step. Neither one of those is a travel destination, so as far as being green, you would have to travel there, then take the train, and then travel from the other spot. So as far as being green, I don't really know, other than for the rental car companies, how it would really benefit. Amtrak has been heavily subsidized. I just don't think the ridership will be there for the for that corridor that's open. I do agree with Joan on one thing. If the high-speed rail were to go in, and if it were to go along I-5, it would be a better plan. But the plan as it is right now is not a good plan, and it's not the most effective use of our money, and it's not the effective ROI or the return on our investment that we would get.
Bankruptcy bill?
Which bill?
Bankruptcy bill?
Bankruptcy bill, I voted against it. As you know, I voted against the bankruptcy bill because basically we made
And remind me, did you vote against last year's?
Last year's I voted for. We reached agreement with the League of Cities on a process that everyone agreed was good. Cities could either declare a fiscal emergency and go directly to bankruptcy, or they could go through a mediation process. This year's bankruptcy bill I voted against because this bill's bankruptcy was changing the process. We weren't even a year into it, and you know, we made a deal, and the city of Stockton, which I actually represent, part of the city, was engaging in that process in a good faith, making a good faith effort, and I believe that the bill as written last year should be allowed to stand.
Do you think the process is working from last year?
I don't know enough yet to know whether it's working or not, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't believe we should change the bill.
Al?
Cities should be allowed to file bankruptcy to clear the slate.
Well, that's not, this would not have prevented them from filing bankruptcy. It just added an obstacle, and actually an obstacle they could have bypassed if they declared an emergency.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, what are we going to see in the next couple of weeks, and what should we see in the next couple of weeks?
Well, you're going to see lots of bills moving through the
No,
legislature.
no,
I know, I'm getting there. And I do believe you're going to see pension reform.
Reform or pension bill?
Well, I would like to think it'll be reform I mean, you can't reform pensions without having a bill, so.
Well, but you're going to have a bill without having reform.
Well, you know, I'm not the key player in this, but I do think you will see, pension reform and a pension bill. I think it will pass the legislature before the end of August. You know, the governor and the legislative staff have been working on it. I'm sure there will be key reforms. You and I both agreed that the pension spiking bill that Fioritani offered this year was better than the one that was vetoed last year. So there are some reforms like that we all know will be part of it in terms of exactly how you deal with new hires. I can't give you the details on that because I know what the governor proposed. I know what the legislature was looking at, but I do believe you will see some form of hybrid plan. I mean, the real issue is going to be that for the state employees that are making $35,000, $40,000 a year, under the governor's plan, it was that 1/3 of their pension would come from a defined benefit, 1/3 would come from Social Security, and 1/3 would come from a 401k type plan. And the problem with employees that are making that level of income, it's pretty hard to take 1/3 from the 401k because they just aren't making that much money. So exactly how you develop that hybrid plan, whether you say, okay, we will have a defined benefit up to a certain amount. After that, the hybrid kicks in or whatever. I mean, we're going to have to figure out that so that there's a plan that's fair. The governor's targeting a plan that would give someone 75% of their income at the time that they retire. I mean, I do think it's it would be reasonable to have something that's fair for the people at the lower income. On the other hand, you have some people, you know, psychiatrists working in prisons that are making $500,000 a year. I think there's got to be an upper cap as well.
Those are all in new tier, right?
What?
That's all in new tier.
Yeah, right.
What's the reform going to be for existing employees?
For what?
For existing employees.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that it's other than the spiking and the other, Dan, I don't know. The problem is, you know, with existing employees is that there are court cases that have said once you give a promise to someone, you can't change that. So we know there can be changes in terms of the spiking and that, because very few of these contracts actually have it written into it. And most of the spiking are occurring in the 1937 Act plans.
And we saw what happened with that in Contra.
That's exactly right.
And they made the very same argument for the on spiking.
Well, Contra Costa is one of the poster childs for pension abuse. I mean, if you talk to the people in the state, they'll tell you it's one of a couple of counties that have been, you know, the biggest abusers, and much of that it happens at the highest level of management. So you know.
Really?
Really? It's the police, it's the fire chief, it's the city administrator. I mean, they don't want to change it a year.
The same rules apply to well over a third, if not a half, of county employees.
I know, but if I'm at the top,
the
and
numbers
I
are just
and I have an interest in it, I should be the one that's leading and not the one that's spiking my salary.
Right,
and
but the spiking is not limited to the top
It's not
echelon.
limited to the top. My point is that the people at the top should be leading by example, and too often they're not.
What about splitting the normal cost?
In terms of contributions?
The normal cost and contributions, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think everyone's going to have to contribute more because we can't allow the debt to continue.
Well, one of the key points the governor has proposed is a 50-50 split on the normal
Right.
cost. Would you support that?
Yes, I would support that. I think it's reasonable.
So my response to that is that the governor has already put forward a plan, for a 12-point pension reform. After reading through it, I agree with all of these cases, and I think this is something that the legislature should vote on now and move forward on. I think the longer we waste time and the more we try to patchwork it together, we have something here that is agreeable right now with the Republicans. It was originated out of the executive office, the Democrats' office. It's something that would get bipartisan support without bickering, and it would be signed by the governor. And I think it's a great starting ground.
Are you good with the governor's plan?
I'm good with the governor's plan with the one tweak that I was talking about. I think you do have to decide again for your low income, your low wage earners, how you're going to develop the hybrid plan.
So you would some sort of way almost means test where the defined benefit converts to
That's
DC.
exactly right. I mean, I think again, if you're making $35,000–40,000 a year, I'm not sure it works. If you're making $100,000, $150,000, it works just fine. So I think the governor submitted his 14-point plan. I think most of the elements most people agree with, and I think on those, we can see if we can improve it.
So basically, there would be a floor,
right?
Or a ceiling, whichever direction you're going.
Yeah, I mean, I think I call
depending on one's perspective.
Yes,
it'd be a tiered approach, but it would be tiered in a different.
In other words, it would not be across the board 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It would step up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. We're going to just wrap up in just a sec, but I wanted to come back to you, Al, for a second.
Sure.
Because you haven't held office, right?
Correct.
And, I spent a little time looking at your material on your website.
Thank you.
And I was trying to understand, it seems like some of the issues you're touting have nothing to do with state government.
Okay.
And so, price of gas has gone up from, I don't know, it's $1.70 4 years ago, but it's gone up, probably doubled in the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
But what does that have to do with being a legislator?
What I was trying to do is trying to draw an example of where we are right now as a state and as a country. As you were just talking about on the pension reform, we are anywhere, and depends on which numbers you read, 250 to 400 billion, up to 884 billion, which was a Stanford report. It runs the gamut of our unfunded pension liability. The state right now.
By the way, I don't think I've ever seen the 884 billion
it was
in any. I don't know where that, because I've read the Stanford report. I've used the Stanford numbers. I've studied them carefully. I've never seen it that high.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know where that number comes from.
Okay.
I saw it on your website. I was going to ask you about it.
Thank you.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
But what does that have to do with gas? What does all this have to do with gas prices?
I was drawing an example on how we are right now and how we are on spending and how out of control our spending has gotten, how it's affecting the common person that's out there working. I was giving examples of how we right now, I work in the trades. I work in the construction industry, and I talk to the folks that are at work, and we are concerned about the gas prices, we are concerned about the prices of our homes decreasing, we are concerned about the economy, we are concerned about jobs, and none of these seem to be being addressed by the state of California.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you know, what is how much?
Well, let me
Okay.
phrase, I think I know where he's going.
Okay.
Okay, you're saying we're spending too much. You're a legislator, you win. What would you stop spending on?
First, I would stop on that train. Second thing is we being the state, found $54 million in the Parks Department. That really shoots down credibility of legislators being able to manage the state's fund. The Department of Finance and the Comptroller's Office are not reconciling their budgets. We have money that is in the budgets that we have no idea what's there. There's been accounting methods that have been used that differ from internal state departments. And that's the phrase that I was using in there was an expression of the frustration of how people are feeling right now with the rising prices, and then turning around and finding money in the government when they're saying, no, we don't have money, our only option is to raise taxes. And then they do a ballot budgeting, which is horrible. You know, they try to paint something with a broad brush, and everyone wants to give. People want to give and to be helpful. But when you lock it in at certain percentages, you're locking in a rate that you may or may not be able to change in the future.
Well, let's just take a quick second. The history of ballot box budgeting in the state originated with the fiscal conservatives. You realize that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and it
I
doesn't.
mean, so.
I mean, that's what locked in percentages.
That's what started this whole thing going,
Right.
right? In terms of ballot box budgeting.
Sure.
So what camp do you fall into then? Are you in the Prop 13 camp? Are you in the, where are, you don't get to have that argument both ways, is I
Sure.
guess what I'm saying.
I understood. I'm for fiscal responsibility, however it comes about. Right now, we cannot just arbitrarily raise taxes when we don't know where our money is at. We need to first find out where our money is, evaluate it, and then decide if we're going to raise taxes.
Well, let me rephrase
Okay,
the
sure.
question.
Thank you.
If you're going to attack ballot box budgeting, are you then going to suggest that we should go back and relook at Prop 13?
We should look at all options that are on the table.
Including Prop 13?
I think Prop 13 needs to stay where it's at.
Can I say something about
Sure.
the state budget? The LEO, when he was presenting to the budget committee, noted that if we were providing the same level of services and programs today that we provided in 7-8, when the recession hit, we need a general fund budget of between $130 and $135 billion. Our general fund budget, if you exclude the governor's initiative, because his assumes it passes, is about $85 billion. So we've cut spending down from the $35 billion down to $85 billion. The problem we have is we have some huge competing needs. When you want to talk about the California that we all grew up in, you know, that had the great education system, that had the great highways and roads, we paid for that. You know, when you take a look at where we are with education today, we've cut K-12 education over 20%. We've cut higher ed over 20%. If you take a look at our roads, 70% of the dollars that we spent on our roads in the last decade have been non-gas tax dollars, because we haven't increased the gas tax in 20 years. And if you don't fund those properly, our roads, for example, if you wait till the last 20% of the life cycle on a road, you spend 6 to 10 times more than if you just have enough money to maintain it during that first 80%. So we spend that much more in tax dollars trying to fix it. So when you take a look at what we've done with the budget, we've made huge cuts to health and human services. We've made huge cuts to K-12 education, to higher education, to many of the programs that we value. The governor is going through a realignment to try and balance the services and where the money goes and where they are and where the services are being provided.
So let me ask you both then, and this is a good way to wrap this up then, okay? Give me then, starting with you, Joan, your vision of where you would like to see the budget, the state go fiscally and in terms of services. And in a nutshell, how would you financially get there?
Well, you know,
because what you're suggesting there is that we've cut back services tremendously, and I hear you saying more than we should have. So where would you go and how would you get there? Yeah.
Well, I think the essential question that the voters are going to have to ask is, what level of services do you want from government and what are you willing to pay for? And, you know, if you have $85 million in the bank, that's all you have to spend. So I can't increase funding in certain areas if the money's not there. And I think, in particular, the cuts to education have been absolutely devastating. You know, having served on a school board for 18 years, I know the differences that it's making in the classrooms today compared to 5 or 6 years ago. I don't think the state would be where it is today without its great education system. We wouldn't be the home of the aerospace industry, of technology, of biotechnology, if we hadn't made those kinds of investments. So ultimately, I think it's not me, it's the people of the state of California.
Okay, so the only thing that's on the table right now,
right,
in terms of the people making a decision, really, is Brown's tax and
right,
you know, Munger tax. If you
and I'll tell you why I'm supporting Brown's tax.
Okay, well, hold on a second.
Okay.
That's the question.
Right.
Okay. Are you convinced that Brown's tax, if it were to pass, would actually go for more services as opposed to salary and benefits on existing workers?
I believe Brown's tax is primarily going to go to paying off the wallet debt. If you take a look at California's budget, when Brown came into office, we had a little over a $26 billion structural deficit. In addition, we had $35 billion in borrowing, $20 billion from special funds and additional revenue anticipation notes we were saving, and $15 billion in deferrals. Education was the biggest deferral, $10 billion. And a deferral is nothing more than a loan from one year to the next year. And the problem is if we don't pay down that wall of debt, we're going to carry over this problem from year to year to year.
But your vote on high-speed rail just added to that.
Well, it added about $300 million a year. You're correct, out of the $85 million budget. You know, but you know, you know, in terms of where we are with the budget right now, we have to pay down that wall of debt, and we have to move forward. So, you know, we have a recession about every 3.5 years. You can take a look at UCLA School of Anderson School of Business at their charts, and you'll see every 3.5 years we have a recession. But in a normal recession, what happens is interest rates go up, they choke off demand, and people stop buying. So the Fed has tools at its authority. It lowers interest rates, and we literally accelerate out of those kinds of recessions. So you see the V-shaped recession. This recession is profoundly different. It's different because it started with the near collapse of the worldwide financial markets. It wasn't just US, you can look abroad to Europe and other countries. It started with the near collapse of the biggest housing bubble we've ever experienced, and California was one of the 3 states that had the biggest housing bubbles. And we had a Fed funds rate that had been down at 1% for almost 3 years. And when your interest rates are 1%, you can't lower them any farther. So this recession is profoundly different, and we are not going to come out of it.
Okay, but my
quickly.
question
And we've got to pay off the wall of debt because
okay,
we will
my
have
question
another
is, why do
recession.
you believe the money will go to pay off the wall of debt?
Because if you take a look at Brown's plan, that's what he's planning to do. And it's the most, it will not pay off all of the debt because there's not enough there, but between that and the slowly easing out, you've got to.
Because you know where the pressure's going to come.
The pressure comes on both sides. You know, the reality with the budget is Republicans blame Democrats, Democrats blame Republicans, but they both have to take ownership for it because California has the 4th most volatile revenue stream in the nation. And it goes like this. And when we're on the upside, everyone has the illusion of having money, and they think that the dot-com bubble is going to continue forever, the real estate bubble is going to continue forever. And my colleagues, Democrats, want to add services or increase funding in certain programs. The Republicans want to cut taxes. And guess what? The bubble bursts, we go on the downside, and then we find ourselves cutting, and then we come up into the next bubble. And we have got to be fiscally responsible and pay down that wall of debt because there will be another recession. And then, you know, if I were the boss up in Sacramento, we need to find a better tax system that doesn't necessarily have people paying more, but that takes the volatility out of it, because it's much better for planning, whether it's schools, roads, or whatever you're doing, to know that your revenue is going to increase like 3% a year than to have, you know, the kind of volatility that we have that, you know, also gave locals the illusion of not having to contribute to pension funds and everything else. And we're going to have to move forward and decide, again, what level of government do we want? What kind of schools do we want? How are we going to fund them? Because right now, I think we're headed in the wrong direction. And if we fix our K-12 schools and there's no room at the end for our kids, that doesn't help build a strong economy. If you talk to the high-tech firms in the Bay Area, they're all here for one reason. They'll tell you it's the intellectual capital. Well, you know, you don't get that by defunding your major colleges and universities. You get that by making investments.
Al?
We make a lot of small, bad decisions as we go along the way. The state continues to spend more money on, I don't want to say frivolous programs, but unthought out programs. And you can talk about the trustees from the UC program. You can talk about folks raising their pay. You can talk about, and one thing I do agree.
But let me go back to the original question, and you know, and that is, what is your vision of where we should be, and how would you get there?
My vision, my long-term vision, is for us to be debt-free. That's not realistic right now. My vision for this next year on the potential tax increase is not to support it. What I would like to do is to see the state be proactive and go through and balance their books, find the money that's there, find out where the spending is at, and then talk about a tax increase.
Do you think that they have not trimmed costs?
I think they have trimmed costs. And I don't know if it's a matter of continuing trimming costs or finding out pockets of money that are hidden around. If there's money there, then apply the money where it needs to go.
So, do you think that the future relies simply on cutting?
No. No, I don't.
Do you think that there's a revenue increase, i.e. tax increase, that's inevitable?
I think that there's a way of increasing the amount that is paid into the tax system without raising the taxes, and paying money into the budget to find money that's into the budget from existing departments. We talk about...
Whoa. Okay. Paying money into the system, are we saying... What are you saying there?
I'm using again the example of the Parks Department. There's money that's...
No. I'm not talking... Okay. I'm trying to bifurcate this into two things you just said there. One is find money within the system, and then you conflated that with and put more money going into the system.
Correct. That's by having more taxpayers.
Pardon?
That's by having more taxpayers.
By having more taxpayers.
Correct.
And by having more taxpayers, how?
Okay, this is a great question, and thank you for asking me, because I was dying to get to this. One of the things that we need to do right now is that we need to improve the Delta. Everyone is in agreement on that. It's a huge public works project that can help. It's $13 billion in estimated costs. Australia right now built 5 desalination plants for $13.2 billion. So with the same cost that you can build the tunnels underneath the delta, you could provide a jobs program, you could provide the desalination plants that will provide for the future, increase the number of people that are working in the state, and increase the supply of water flow to the state that wouldn't be dependent on snowpack melt.
I'm totally confused. Did you just say that you're for or against the peripheral canal too?
I'm against it.
You're against it,
Yeah.
okay.
I think the money should be applied,
Okay.
should be taking that $13 billion and build a long-term solution that would not rely on runoff or snowpack,
And how's that bringing more tax revenue into?
because you would have more people working and it would increase the taxpayer base.
Okay, so so you see it as a jobs program.
Correct.
Wait a minute.
Doesn't it?
That's the argument they used on high-speed rail.
Yeah.
It's a jobs program.
Yeah, but high-speed rail is a rail that's going no place. It's not gonna really benefit the community at large in the long term. In the long term, down the road, what we need is a long-term solution to the Delta, to the water in Southern California, and to provide a source of water that's gonna be uninterrupted and undisturbed by climate, either climate change, man-made, or global climate change, however you wanna look at it. The $13 billion for the tunnels happens to be about the same cost as 5 desalination plants. So if they were gonna dig the tunnel, they could have manpower dig the desalination plants, put them in, support the jobs that will be building those, have a long-term plan to finish it, and I think it would help protect the Delta, make a long-term plan for providing water, increase the number of people that are working, which would increase the tax basis. And
So basically, let's assume it costs $13 billion on a one-time basis.
yeah,
And the tax revenue back to the state, I don't know, 20% maybe?
Not that high, the highest tax
Yeah,
rate
I mean,
is
but
10.
let's assume there's a stimulus effect so that those dollars roll over a few times, okay, just for purposes of discussion.
Okay,
So you might get a one-time infusion, optimistically, of $2.5 billion. I mean, that's really optimistic. Is that enough for your plan for long range for the state?
so long-term range, the plants would provide jobs for now and into the future. They would continue
The plants
the
would.
desalination plants.
Yeah, but it's, even if
Very
you
people.
built it, wouldn't provide very many jobs.
5 desalination plants would provide a lot of jobs.
Maybe to
Yeah.
build them,
Yeah.
but not
Not
to operate
not to
them.
operate, yeah.
Oh, they would take hundreds of people, thousands of people to operate them. But anyways, I believe that it would increase the tax basis and provide a long-term support. So if you're gonna talk about ways that we got out of recessions and depressions in the past, what they've done is huge infrastructure projects, the Hoover Dam, the freeway system. And this would be a way of providing multiple solutions and increase the tax base.
Actually, the best way we went to war.
Yeah.
Yeah, this time we spent too much money on it. though.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
That's how we got out.
that's how we got out of the big one.
Exact- yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Very much
Thank you,
appreciate
thank you
coming
for
in.
accommodating me.